Welcome, everyone, to ConverSapien, the podcast all about having conversations with interesting Homo sapiens. I am your host and favorite of the species, Caleb Wildman, and I want to thank you for making ConverSapien a part of your day. You may have noticed that episode 10 is coming to you a week after it normally would have released. We did not have an episode last Monday, which you would have known if you follow us on social media. If you don't, be sure to follow ConverSapien Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, wherever else. But we did take a short vacation last week, and now we are back at it with episode 10 on Monday morning, this lovely 28th of September. This week, I am talking with Krista Thom, who is the woman who never sits. Krista lives with an extreme sciatica issue, which makes her sitting disabled, a term that I was not familiar with and that I'm sure a lot of you probably have never heard of before, unless someone in your family or yourself has experienced those issues. In our conversation, we talk about what it's like for her living in a world that revolves around chairs and sitting down. You sit down in restaurants, at the movie theater, at your job, if you have a desk job, in your car, and even in an airplane, you're legally bound to sit down when taking off. Well, those are all things that she cannot really do. For almost 3 years now, she's only been able to stand straight up or lay down. The middle position of sitting causes her severe pain that massively impacts her life in a negative way. Krista has a website where she chronicles some of her experiences on a blog called myuprightlife.com, and she's also very involved in a sitting disability support group on Facebook. After having this conversation, I would certainly recommend that everyone read into this idea of sitting disabilities because it's something that we look over so easily, but it affects many people in our society. Despite the negative impacts of her condition, Krista is an amazing guest with a lot of awesome information to share with us and a fascinating life that she shares with us in our conversation today. All that coming right up after this amazing, jazzy little stinger.
You're listening to
ConverSapien.
I am here with Krista Thom, who I think we'll call today the woman who never sits.
Yeah,
I think
that's a good name for me. You can call me that if you want to, Caleb.
That'll be your superhero name for today.
Yeah.
So Krista has a very unique medical thing going on, and I saw her post on a website about it and said, I got to get her on here to talk about it. So if you could tell us really quick, Krista, what is going on?
Right.
You haven't been able to sit for 2 years, right? Is that right?
That's right. And it's actually been close to 3 years that I've had
Close to
problems
3.
with it. And it's been 2 years. And I remember the actual date. It was July 31st, 2018. That was the last day that I really actually sat down.
Good
and since
gravy.
then, it's only been basically when it's legally required. So I'm going on more than 2 years, actually, of never sitting down at all,
Wow.
which I guess is a little bit unusual.
Yeah. Yes, I would say so from my perspective. This is so strange. And I'm a person that lived through my own strange medical issues before, so I know that it must be very hard to get anyone to understand where you're coming from with this as well, just speaking from my own experiences.
It definitely is a little bit unusual, and probably the strangest thing about it is that even I myself, even though I had this problem, I went years without realizing that this is a thing that people have, and it's called sitting disabilities. And there is a group of people, and it's not probably a lot of people who, choose to join that group, but there definitely are other people in the same same position who just live their lives completely unable to sit down. So the fact that I was living with this daily for about 2 years before I had even heard the term sitting disabilities or knew of anybody else with anything similar, I find incredible. And it was only last year really that I came across a website and a book that was written by this guy named Rick Lunkenheimer. And he's in this Facebook group. And he wrote a book and a website about his experiences, which were fairly similar to mine. Yeah. And all of a sudden it was just like, boom. Light bulb goes off. It's not just me. Like, it's not. Right. Yeah. So it's interesting in that even though I was dealing with it, even I didn't recognize it as its own unique sort of category.
Right, because it's probably so rare that we don't have any. Well, I mean, reading over the notes that you sent me about it is the first time I've ever heard the phrase seated disability. So when we talk about sitting disabilities, in your case, your symptom was sciatica. That's like nerve inflammation, more or less. Is that correct to say? Or?
No, you're on the right track, but not quite. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to back up a little bit more to explain. And also, so I'm going to explain my particular issues, but keep in mind that I didn't really understand this myself until quite recently, what exactly was happening. Right. But so what the very beginning start of my problem was a herniated disc. Okay. And so that basically, there's a few different layers of types of material in that disc. And so basically the softer stuff from the center was poking out and poking into my nerve. And when you sit down, or really anytime I bend forward, it's called your spine being in flexion. It presses that material, it's like squishing one side of it and it squishes out the back, almost like those, toys where you push them and they pop out their eyes. Right. Yes. Probably a little less dramatic, but similar concept. Yeah. So pushing into my nerve. So anytime I would sit down, my problem would get worse. But it was also, and this is just the nature of it, sometimes it's very difficult to see a result on an MRI or any sort of imaging and link that to the actual symptoms that I'm having. And there are some different reasons for that, but that was very much what happened with me. So all I knew for a long time is, whenever I was sitting down, I would have these problems. And now I've come to learn it's fairly common. I was reading a statistic the other day that said 40% of people with a herniated disc will have some discomfort with sitting. And I think usually people don't have it quite to the degree I have. I mean, it may be like, I don't like to be in the car too long, but it's not like I can't sit down ever. Right. So just that little bit of discomfort is not really that unusual because plenty of people have herniated discs. But the extent of problems that I was having were beyond the norm. Right. So that was kind of where my problems came from. And that's why I still don't sit down today. As I record this, I'm standing here in my office and I have a standing desk that I've rigged up out of a desk and a table. So that's just something I've gotten used to. Yeah. You say that you remember the day well, you could give the date of, when you first, that's like the I can't sit anymore date. How, can you describe what you mean by that? Was it like a pain symptom and you're just like, I'm done? How does that date manifest for you? Right. So for me, this seemed significant. And the setup for this particular issue was I was on a combination. It was a work and personal trip in the UK. And so I had gone to the UK before as an exchange student, spent a semester there. And when I was there, I had this whole history of problems with Charlie horses, and it turned out I wasn't getting enough calcium and learned to drink more milk. Anyway, solved that problem. So then I was in the UK again, and I came prepared. I mean, I had so many supplements. I had, I'd studied up on electrolytes because I was expecting this to be a thing. So I was, eating bananas. I was eating Marmite plain for the salt, plenty of cocoa powder for magnesium, and then, drinking. I brought calcium supplements and drinking lots of milk whenever I could. Right. And still, just as I was hanging around, going through my daily business, and then when I'd lay down at night, I would get these horrible twitches and cramps and Charlie horses. And I thought, what the heck? I'm doing, I prepared for this. I
Right.
thought I knew what was going on. And I remember specifically, it was April 7th, 2017 is the first distinct memory that I have of this problem, because the next day, April 8th, was my 30th birthday. So then, looking back, once my problems got a little bit worse, it was like, wow, I hit 30 and really started going downhill immediately. Man, sign me up for Social Security right now.
You really made the meme come to life there.
Right, exactly. So on my 30th birthday, I went with my sister and brother-in-law, and we went to Edinburgh, and I was so sleep deprived from, just laying in bed cramping the entire night.
Yeah.
That it was a great time, loved Edinburgh, but I very distinctly remember that as, the origin of my current disc problems.
Right. And so these cramps were mostly in muscle spasms, you say, were mostly in your legs?
Right,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, and it's mostly in my right leg, a little bit in my left leg too,
Okay.
which is normal for sciatica.
Right. Okay. So for people like myself who kind of are trying to put that puzzle piece together, how does the spine connect with, you see what I'm saying? How does your spine connect with causing cramping in the leg?
Sure, absolutely. So it'd be, I would like to say it'd be easier if I could show you a diagram, but I've looked at a lot of diagrams, and it still takes a lot of studying.
It's still hard.
Yeah. But basically how it works is, all right, so, you're familiar with the spinal cord and you have nerves, and at each level of your vertebrae, there will be some nerves that will exit out of that, and then later they'll join up into other nerves and go off into your arms, your torso, wherever it is that they need to be.
Right.
So your sciatic nerve, it's the largest nerve in your body, and it runs from your low back, and it sort of winds its way down your leg and into the foot. And there are, the different parts of that cord start exiting from a few different spinal levels, and then they join together. So basically, if you have a problem with the disc, it can touch that nerve root as it's exiting the spine.
Right.
And that's where you can start experiencing those symptoms and have problems.
Right. Okay. So
But because the nerve,
Yes.
it's long and it goes all the way down to the bottom of your feet, you'll feel it all through your leg, even
All the
though
way through.
that's not where the problem actually is.
Right. But just the irritation of the herniated disc is causing that to light up all the way down your leg, more or less.
That's exactly it.
How did this impact your work? You mentioned something about that, and I wanted to dive into that. And this is
Right.
something that so many people with chronic illnesses deal with. It's like it completely turns your life upside down. So what was your job, and then how was it impacted by this?
Right. So I was working in academic publishing. So that's, anytime you read one of those, according to a study published in the journal, I was working on those journals, and
Okay.
I wasn't an editor for them. I wasn't reading this research. I was on the business side, and the actual details of my job are very bureaucratic, but basically it was a sitting job, at an academic publishing company, in the business management part of it. So of course, as I first started having these problems, and, at first it was just when I lay down to sleep, I kept noticing all these twitches and horrible things, and I'd get terrible cramps. So it was really just, I was so incredibly sleep deprived. And of course, so I noticed fairly soon that's affecting your performance, because
Sure.
I couldn't concentrate on anything, couldn't figure it out. So, I was a little bit worried about that. And then as time went on, and so I was dealing with this problem from April of 2017. And then I had sort of a cutoff date, July 31st of 2018, when I got my surgery. So in that time, I was running around, scheduling all these doctor's appointments, trying to find somebody, who could tell me what was going on, trying all these different medications, all these different treatments. And so just from all of that, I would try to be responsible. My company had fairly lenient work from home policies, but still I had to be out of the office a lot, running to all these different doctors. I had fun with all these medication side effects. I was still, none of this actually fixed me. So I was getting more and more sleep deprived. And like there were times, and for some reason I'm always worse in the summer. So there would be times, and especially right there towards the end, towards my surgery, where I would be standing on my feet for over 20 hours a day. I mean, there would be at least one night a week that I wasn't sleeping at all. And a good night's sleep for me would be 4 to 6 hours, and that was rare. And the rest of the time, I was just on my feet walking around, like incredible pain all the time, so distracted, basically, getting through my work like a zombie. And it would be that sensation of, because a lot of times, I was worried about my job and my performance. And so a lot of times when I'm up all night, I'd be sitting there working. And then, I'd get a response to my email the next day, and I would just look at it and be like, I don't remember writing that email. Like, it's good.
Yeah, well, sleep. That's the thing. Sleep deprivation, I mean, they've shown is like, I want to say that I've heard before that if you are sleep deprived for like 48 hours, it's equivalent to being like over the legal limit of intoxication. Like, has serious effects on cognition and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I was starting to hallucinate all the time. I would just see things like, I remember one time I was at the gym and I thought it was like a waterfall just like burst out of this mirror and was like starting everywhere. I'd be like sitting at work talking to somebody, and there would just be like this trickle of bugs crawling all around their head. And I'd be like, yes, I see what you're talking about with that work thing. Very interesting. So, I mean, I was just so out of it and, faking normal this whole time. And I mean, my supervisor was incredibly understanding, and I give her props because she was very supportive of all my medical needs. But, I felt bad. I felt like I wasn't doing my best as an employee because my focus was elsewhere.
Sure.
Yeah.
Man, I can only imagine seeing bugs just crawling over someone and having to fake that everything's fine.
Right.
Yeah, thanks for the financials report.
Yes, but I'm totally concentrating on what you're saying. That's
right. You just said that you seem to be worse in the summer, and this is jumping ahead down your some of your notes you were giving me earlier, but we'll come back to it. But I wanted to go ahead and hop on that. When you said on here that you still have questions, and one of them is why you don't know why you're sensitive to hot weather or why salt seems to help your problem.
Right.
That's both of those things are so strange. So hot weather, like in summer, you tend to have worse symptoms, basically.
Yeah, and by now it's been, a few years, and I notice a definite pattern. And it's almost like when it hits probably about 75, 80 degrees, I'll get worse. And I remember one time, so in February 2019, when I realized, the surgery hadn't really done anything and I was desperate to find another solution. So I flew to Rochester, Minnesota to go to the Mayo Clinic. I'm from North Dakota. I'd heard all these great things about it. So I endured the airplane ride. And as I got there, it was, there was this cold snap that day. And I mean, we're talking a high of negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And I was worried because, I sat through the airplane ride and then I had to take a shuttle to Rochester. And I actually had a pretty good night. Which was really unusual. And the whole time I was there, and, I made a side trip to Fargo because that's where my family is. And the whole time I was there, my nerves were just like amazingly good.
Wow.
And I noticed that really anytime, like now that it's starting to get a little bit cooler in the fall, it's immediately like, oh, that feels better for some reason. And now I know, so I don't have an explanation for why this is.
Right.
But I have heard anecdotally from several other people with sciatica. And for most people, actually cold weather seems to make their problems worse. And I don't know if it's like, so I have what's called an underhook, meaning when that nerve is, there's something pressing on the nerve and basically mine is pushing on the underside of it. So when I bend my head forward and sort of, lift my nerve up off of that a little bit, that actually feels better for me. For most people with a herniated disc, they have an overhook. So if they lean their head forward, it causes more pain. And so I'm not sure if that's related to the difference or if this is totally unrelated. But for whatever reason, that makes a difference. And like you said, the salt intake, again, I offer no explanation for why this is. But, I've been dealing with this long enough where it's a very clear link. And so now tonight, like before I go to sleep, I'll drink a glass of salt water, or sometimes, like soy sauce mixed with water.
Sure.
Yeah, of course, like as people do. Forget the slow sodium thing. Like, I'm not speaking about my blood pressure. But anyway, it's one of those things, I found so few things that actually treat my condition, but I'll drink this glass of salt water and it is like an immediate difference. It's almost like a cooling balm where it'll be like,
that's
all
so
of a sudden that's better. It is strange. And again, I wish I knew the reason for that, and I don't.
It makes me wonder if there's any sort of like osmosis thing going on. I don't know. I have like no understanding of biology really, but that just comes to mind,
Right,
but
right.
How weird.
Your guess is as good as mine, so sure.
I don't know. Sure, we'll go with it's osmosis. Do you have any inclination, like, what caused the initial herniated disc?
Yeah, so this is something that I have learned recently. And I spent, you have to understand, I went to so many doctors, and for so long, all I got was, it's a mystery. We don't really understand why backs cause this. We don't know how to treat it well. Like, I'm sorry. And it was only recently that I came across these books by a doctor from Canada named Stuart McGill. And I read through, Back Mechanic is the one he wrote for the general public, and I tore through that in a hurry. And then I read his textbook called Low Back Disorders. And so that's where I really fit the profile for this herniated disc, because what he says is there's sort of this chain of events. And usually how this happens is it starts with some sort of a compressive injury. And by that, I mean, you're weightlifting wrong, or there's too much force on your spine. Yeah. And that injures the end plate of the vertebrae. So that causes some of that gel from the inside of your disc to get displaced already, and it changes how forces are channeled within the disc. And so then what you'll start, like, repeated flexion, and like I talked about, I was sitting, it put my spine into that slight bend forward, so I was also always placing pressure on that disc. And so repeated flexion after some sort of compressive injury, that is basically what causes a disc herniation. And it's why it's a real problem for, maybe the weekend warriors or people who are mostly sedentary, but are also engaging in pretty strenuous exercise. And, I had been, before this, I loved pole dancing was my thing. I loved doing that. And then, I started going to the gym a lot, weightlifting, trying to get stronger, to be better at it. And so these forces combined, and then, going and sitting at my job all day, it was just sort of the perfect situation for an injury like this to occur. So once I put that together, and, the good news is that also gave me some idea of what to do to deal with that.
Right.
And basically, well, I don't know, there's a few different aspects. But just knowing the mechanisms and what had actually triggered it in the first place, and understanding the mechanical cause within my spine helped me to figure out, along with the advice in these books, what to do to actually help myself and improve that situation.
You mentioned that since reading that book, Back Mechanic, you've been practicing good spine hygiene. In my head, I'm like, we have a toothbrush maybe, and you're kind of brushing the teeth.
Yeah.
Just sort of an interesting word that you don't hear very often. And you've been practicing the big 3 exercises. Could you describe for us what the big 3 exercises are?
Yeah. Well, and I wish I could tell you that spine hygiene is like, in an old cartoon where they get that big brush to rub their lower back with it.
Exactly. Get all the plaque out.
It's not that. So basically, the spine hygiene part of it is just creating good movement patterns throughout the day. So for example, when I put on my socks, that used to hurt because I was bending my spine forward in a way that was hurting me. So now, there's squats and lunges, and there's particular movement patterns, which are illustrated in these books, that you can use that will avoid putting too much pressure on the spine. Right. And then the big 3 exercises, I do those every day. And that's the bird dog, the side plank, and the curl up. And, again, it's kind of hard to illustrate those over the a podcast.
Sure.
But the idea of it is it strengthens some of the muscles in your core that help to support and stabilize the spine. And the comparison that McGill always makes is he compares it to guy wires. So basically, if you have a pole that's just sticking up straight, and we'll say it's a straightened coat hanger, and you press a book down on the top of that coat hanger, or you bend it from side to side, well, it's not going to take much for that to just, fall over. But if you have some supports, maybe fastened to it, where it's supported from multiple angles on the side with different wires, well, it's a lot harder to topple that or to compress that down.
Right.
So the point is just to build those stabilizing muscles so that it's not just my spine that's absorbing all the forces in my body. It's the muscles are doing that work too. Right. So that's more about, helping to keep me from getting further injured and preventing any further injuries that I may cause myself.
Right. You mentioned you tried basically everything, which you
so
kind
many
of
things.
alluded to. It's even epidural injections. A strange question that I have for you, it may be a little bit weird, but I find that talking to people who are with these unknown illnesses, they're like looking everywhere. Have you ever looked at just like crazy, like new agey stuff?
Oh, geez. I mean, you don't know how much time I spent on the internet at 3 a.m.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what I'm thinking, like knowing what that's like to have some sort of chronic illness and nobody has the answer. You do wind up on all these subreddits.
Right. And it's not just that. It's because I couldn't sit down. So anything, I'd go to church or to work or someplace and I'm so visible because I'm standing while everyone else is sitting. And then, so of course people come up and they ask what's going on. And I'll say it's a back issue. And everybody has a back issue. Everybody knows somebody who has a back issue.
Yes.
Everybody has something that they swear
Everybody
by.
can relate. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I didn't even have to try. The suggestions would come to me.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And so I tried quite a few of those things. I got like a TENS machine. I tried these different supplements online. I tried the rack brace. And at a certain point, I just had to cut it off and be like, I have to have a limit of evidence because I can't take every suggestion that people give me. I need a certain standard of evidence before I'm even going to bother. I've probably heard of just about everything. I've tried a good chunk of it. There are still things that I have not tried.
You got to get the right essential oil.
That's it. That's clearly been my problem.
You got to smell the right.
I need
right
rose
scent.
oil or sandalwood or whatever it is you use.
Right. Find the one that stimulates, the energetic channels in your back.
Exactly.
Have you found yourself through any of this? Another common experience of people in these cases. Have you found yourself disenchanted with Western medicine at all, or with just our medical system in general?
Yeah, so obviously that's something that I've struggled with because there was a time when I was just, I was done with all medical treatment.
Right.
And I had actually a very long conversation at the Mayo Clinic, not with the doctor who was treating me, but with a doctor who happened to be living in the same house where I was renting a room. And he was originally from Korea, and we had this long conversation about what was wrong with me, Eastern versus Western medicine. He was not optimistic that I would find a treatment, and basically just encouraged me, you're wanting a silver bullet. It may just not happen. You just need to find your own path, basically, that was actually really helpful and inspirational to me. And so for a long time, I was just done with medicine because what good had I ever gotten from it,
Right.
And now, since I discovered these books, and I over the last few months, I had gotten significantly better, which is why I keep referencing them because they actually do help. But when I started reading these books, it was another light switch of the answers are there. We understand more about the spine and spinal conditions than I thought we did. That knowledge exists in the world and I can find it. And so now I've been going on this big research tear, and I noticed something very interesting as I've been checking, and I've been reading through the academic research. That's one good thing. My background as a publisher is I know where to look at this data. I'm not a scientist, but I'm pretty good at finding things and evaluating, should I pay attention to this or not? And so as I've been looking at journals and textbooks that are specific to these certain disciplines, like neurology, orthopedics, physical therapy, what have you, and just the exact information they contain, and I'm particularly interested in back issues, and it's a completely different set of information. And the points which are relevant for me are in so many cases left completely vague, where it's like, I'm reading very detailed textbooks, very detailed guidelines on, clinical examinations, guidelines put out by these academic societies. And they're just, they're not that helpful. And I can understand why my doctors, maybe weren't that able to help me. Yeah. Because it's just, doctors are human, and there's so much to know about medicine, and no one can know it all. That's just completely ridiculous. And so they're getting their information from these particular sources that have to do with their specific training and specialty. And in many cases, that information isn't what is needed to treat patients like me. So I don't blame the doctors for this. It's more so a failure to sort patients to the right sort of treatment and to recognize what's wrong and to get them to that specialist or somebody who can actually help. And that's, I think, where I kind of fell through the cracks, and I think many other people do too. I mean, there's a lot of back treatment horror stories out there. And that's been my experience, because I worked with, so many caring, understanding, trying to be very helpful doctors who just didn't know what to do with me.
Yeah.
And so I don't really blame them, but there is sort of a systemic failure there, which I think could be dealt with better.
Yeah.
I mean, picking on the medical system is about as easy as picking on airlines, which I also do. But there's my 2 cents. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a friend who is a mobility coach, and he practices in the UK. And I interviewed him on this show too. And we're talking, basically what he does is, you might see him as sort of an athletic coach in a way, but he also is very passionate about physiology and about how, kind of like what you were talking about with spinal hygiene, about how movement itself impacts our health and moving correctly. And that's something that he is sort of critical about. Well, we both share a criticism because I've had my own run with craziness. And, but that's something that we're both we question, I guess. And in him in particular, is that we seem to, in the West, see things so specialized and so labeled that it's like you go to the eye doctor, but really maybe there's an issue that's causing that problem that's neurological. And so you wind up wasting a lot of time running around in circles with all these specialists. So I was wondering, like, your symptoms manifest in leg issues. Was there any initial leg concern before they found that it was a herniated disc, or were you lucky to go straight for the spine?
Well, so at first I went to an urgent care clinic, and that was, that was a waste of time. And then I put it together a year before I had, a really severe case of painful sciatica. So I, and I was at the time dating this surgical resident, and he was able to figure out what it was and basically told me don't even go into the hospital. So I, and there it felt like there was a length of barbed wire that was wrapping around my leg and stabbing me from the inside. So I could feel exactly where my sciatic nerve was.
Yes.
So after a while of getting these cramps and twitches, I put it together of like, wait a minute. Because it was twitches, I didn't put it together right away. But eventually I figured out this is happening exactly where I was getting that sciatic pain. I think this has to do with my sciatic nerve. Right. So then I started, I basically diagnosed myself with that, and then I started choosing my own specialists.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. I mean, that's one less hump to get over in the whole thing. I've heard so many horror stories of people that, it's like before they even get to the bottom line, they're passed off from one guy to the next.
Yeah. I mean, God help primary care doctors, because I don't know how they can even recognize everything that comes to them.
Right.
So I got sympathy there. But.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's like, you have all of these patients, you got a full caseload, and you have to know everything about everything.
Yeah.
Really, you have to know
Exactly, yeah.
everything about every problem that could happen, and there's just not a possible way for that to really be
Right.
feasible for people. You mentioned on your notes that you were you had met your current husband when these problems started, and you were afraid that he would dump you when you were talking to him about it, or you even tried to convince him to.
Yeah.
But he declined.
I did do that. Yeah, that was, so I'm going to tell the story. You
Okay.
can't stop me.
Okay.
Because this made a huge difference to my life. And, I've
Okay.
heard, I'm unusual in this respect because many people, as I'm sure you've heard, who have chronic illnesses or chronic pain, that drives a wedge between them and their significant others. So
Right.
you do hear, people divorce, they break up.
Sure.
It does happen. So I met my husband. It was in July of 2017, a few months after my problem started. And at that point, I was still very much thinking, this is just a bump in the road. I'm going to get this little thing taken care of and move on with my life. So I was determined that, I was dating through OkCupid, and I was like, nobody needs to know about this. I'm not going to tell them. I don't want them to judge me for it. Like, this is just a minor thing we shouldn't even think about.
Right.
So, I went on a few dates with this guy, and actually, a few dates in, because I was into pole dancing and he used to do gymnastics. And so he was like, show me some moves, come and do
Yes,
that. And I
yes,
was thinking
yeah.
this is going to kill me. This is going to kill me. But I did it because I liked him. So we did that, and we had a few more dates. And finally, my problems were getting worse and worse because it was summer. I wasn't sleeping. I was going to all these doctors, and I realized, like, I can't lie to him about where I am all the time. Like, I'm always at these doctor's appointments, or I'm out walking because for whatever reason that helps.
Right.
I've just got to tell him. And so finally I did, and I sat him down. I'm like, I have to tell you something. I've got this problem with my sciatic nerve. Nobody can figure it out. I'm doing poorly at work because of it. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what it is. Like, I can't do these normal things. I can't sit. I can't sleep, why? And I can't make any guarantee that I'm going to get over this. I don't know what's going to happen. And so, like, after I did all this, and I was like, I understand, like, if you want to leave, that's fine. Go find somebody else. I will completely respect that. And, like, after I'm done, and he's just looking at me impassively, and I finish, and finally I'm like, well, so? And he's like, is that it? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, I thought you were going to say, like, you cheated on me or something. Like, what? Why would I be mad at you for something that you didn't do? Like, that's not your fault. And I thought, honestly, that was a little bit weird. And that conversation and several more, like, as my problems were getting worse, I told him, like, you can leave. I wouldn't blame you for it. Like, I wouldn't want to deal with me.
Yeah.
But he stuck around. For some reason, he decided it was worth it. And so we got married last year, and I planned the entire wedding around not being able to sit down. So I didn't stand or sit for my entire wedding.
Wow.
And he's been incredibly supportive and kind to me, and he's totally okay. If I can't work in an office, whatever I need to do, he's fine with, as long as I'm trying to take care of myself.
That's
so
awesome.
I got really lucky on that one.
Yeah, that's great. So you stood even through your whole wedding reception. You stand at restaurants. You stand at movie like. Tell us about all the standing, because I think hearing those things really makes you appreciate the gravity of it.
Right,
because there's all these places where, we're used to sitting in an airplane, at the theater, at the restaurant, all these things.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't really realize just how much you need to sit until you can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
So even, I gave up driving for a while, and now I ride in the car, and I've hooked up, like, it's like a ramp, and I've got cushions in there so I can keep my spine straight and not sit down. I walk everywhere that I can, and I'm lucky because I can walk and stand all day. When I go on airplanes, when I have to, and there's actually a law that you have to be in your seat and strapped in for takeoff, So I do that and I endure it and I hate it. And then I stand in the flight attendant area during the entire flight. I'll tell the flight attendants earlier, listen, here's the case. I'm going to stand here, and I get in their way, and, oh well. And like I said, I go to movie theaters, and usually I can stand in the wheelchair spot. I used to really love theater. Obviously, that's kind of a problem, but we started going to plays in the park. So obviously not this year, but plays in the park, so I can stand in the back and dance. And, that's a lot of fun anyway. But yeah, it's all these things. When I'm in a restaurant, everybody else will be sitting at the table, and I'll grab my plate up like this, and I'll be standing up here. And I get tons of, servers bring me so many chairs, even though I tell them I don't need it. And they're trying to be nice. I mean,
right. Like, what does this woman do?
Yeah, exactly. They're like, you look uncomfortable. We'll get you a seat, ma'am. And I'm like, you don't understand, but thanks for the thought. So yeah, one time I was at a work conference, and I was standing in the back, listening to this talk, and one of the attendants, actually kicked me out. She said it's a fire code violation. Like you can't be standing here. And I said, well, I can't sit down anywhere. And she said, well, there's no standing in the aisles. You have to leave. So I did.
Oh my gosh.
So it's just, all these things that people don't really think about, because sitting is supposed to be comfortable. That's supposed to be the most comfortable thing.
Right. And it's the most uncomfortable thing.
Right. If I'm at a family member's house, I'll just put down an air mattress or something and camp out on the floor. But of course, if it's somebody I don't know well, then I stand through a lot of things.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, well, I mean, just socially, you're probably like, well, I can't really just lay down on this person's floor.
Yeah, it doesn't always work.
Golly, that's so... One thing that you talked about just now, and you mentioned later, and I thought the way you put it was really interesting. You said that there are laws, right, that sitting disabled people are basically forced to break. Like, obviously with the airplane one you can't because they're so hardcore, but like having to lay down in the back seat of an SUV.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that it would be like basically like requiring people in a wheelchair to stand up for certain things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I've ridden in any conceivable method because, in my own car, I have, and we bought an Explorer because it was literally the only car that I could be comfortable in that ramp situation. Yeah. But when I take an Uber or something, I tell them I'm going to lay across the back seat. Hope that's okay. Or, well, if it's an SUV type car, you can lay down sometimes that back row and lay across the back like cargo. Right. So I've been transported and basically like, oh, we've had so much fun, like pretending that I'm a kidnapping victim. But that's kind of the situation that you have to be in. And then, of course, in airplanes, I can't sit down, and this is something that not just me, but a lot of people have struggled with. And we've fought with the airlines, tried taking it up with the FAA. There was this one lawyer in Norway who did a heck of a job trying to find some way around it. And there just isn't a good way. But if you can just imagine like a law that required somebody in a wheelchair to stand up during takeoff, right. I mean, that would be I wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah.
But you're basically forcing us to do something that we can't do. It's like, and I'm sorry, like, I'm sure that law is there for a good reason, but I can't change my physical limits.
Right.
Like, I'm sorry. So it's just weird things like that. Or, you can get a car that's set up for a person in a wheelchair, but if you can't sit down, what are your options? You really don't have any. So it's just, there's certain transportation is the biggest issue, but there's just some of those things where we've come so far as a society in terms of recognizing disabilities and accommodating for them. And, that's great. I'm glad that somebody in a wheelchair can go up a ramp and get into a building. Right. But just because it's wheelchair accessible doesn't mean it's physically accessible to everybody.
To everyone.
So that's something that, I deal with and gets to be kind of a bee in my bonnet. And I understand, sometimes I feel bad asking for some accommodations because it's like you can't, no matter what setup you have, if you're a restaurant owner designing whatever thing, it's never going to fit everybody.
Right.
But it's just I wish there was some option somewhere.
Right.
And if you can't sit down, a lot of times you're just out of luck. Nobody even thinks about it.
Right. Have you ever heard of a reason given by the FAA or anybody for the airplane law? Because that's...
I've
such an
never
interesting
heard
thing.
anything official. My guess here, and keep in mind, this is just my guess. I'm
Sure.
guessing it's some sort of counterterrorism measure of just
Sure.
making sure everybody is fastened in.
Right.
Which I don't want a terrorist to take over the plane either.
Right.
I just don't want to be strapped there.
Right. When you go to restaurants, do you specifically like? There's plenty of not plenty, but there's lots of restaurants that do have high top tables and things like that. Does that something that affects your choices on where
Oh, I
to eat?
love them. I think all restaurants should be required to have bar height tables.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, well, now there's coronavirus, but where I lived before, I could tell
Right.
you every restaurant within walking distance that had bar height tables. There was this one that had bar height tables and a train running around the top side. I didn't like the food, but we
Awesome.
went there all the time because it was great.
Yeah, that's great. Sorry, I'm just like wrapping my head around it all. It's so interesting because this
Right,
is not something that is on the.
I had it and didn't realize it was a
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, like
So
you said,
I understand. It does
and
take
everybody-
a little mental switch to
Sure,
get used to.
And everybody, kind of like you're alluded to, everyone is so familiar with the wheelchair, and it's great that as a society we've come so far on that. But nobody really is familiar with this unless you're affected by it or someone that you
Right.
love is affected by it. So back to those like real world experiences that I think are so illustrative, if that's a word, of
Sure.
what's of your condition. You also said that like you can't get your hair cut, for example. You can't go
Right.
to a salon and have your hair professionally cut.
Yeah, I mean, I stopped doing that. Now,
Yeah.
my mom cuts my hair when I see her.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about, because obviously travel is out of the thing, so I might just shave it off and be done with it. Then I don't have to worry about it for a while. But yeah, I don't want to be stuck in that chair. So haircuts,
Right.
nail salons, anything like that are not me friendly.
Right. Is there, in times when you do have to sit down and like, for those takeoffs, what is the sensation that you feel?
For me, it will first be, there will be a definite like, ooh, that's uncomfortable, but I can tolerate it at first.
Right.
And then slowly, like, I'll get more of those. I don't know if you've ever had nerve pain sensations, but that pricking, tingling, sometimes searing pains, I'll get that shooting through my legs, and then I'll start to get more cramps and everything. But the real killer is, if it was just during the flight, I could suck it up and be in pain, whatever. But then it will often be for 2-3 nights afterwards. I can't sleep because I'm getting all these cramps.
Yeah.
So that's really my problem. It's not so much that it hurts at the time, it's that it hurts for so long afterwards.
Right.
So if I'm on an airplane, I purposely will have to fly 2 to 3 days before I need to be anywhere, just to give
Wow.
myself time to, decompress.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you noticed any sort of threshold time? Like, is it if you sit at all that effect happens, or after, can you do 10 minutes and then, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or is it just hard to really say?
Any amount is bad. Honestly, for me, the worst thing is if I have to sit 2 days in a row. The more days in a row I have to sit down for any length of time, the worse it is.
Yeah.
If I can limit it to 1 day, it's not pleasant, but bearable.
So spinal hygiene has been recently helping you, and you mentioned that walking has helped you. Is there anything else that you've found that's really helped you out, or those your main practices right now?
Yeah, that's it. And then we mentioned like temperature and salt are part of it. But those are sort of the pillars of my program. I get a good night's sleep. That's also very important. Spine hygiene, big 3,
Yeah.
be well hydrated.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what I do.
Do you track how much you walk a day? That might be interesting to know if you're doing a lot of extra walking.
I haven't, but only because it's a little depressing. So I used to, I have like specific routes that I do. So when I'm walking on those routes, I would do like 7 to 8 miles.
Wow.
Usually it's at least 6 miles. Now I have a treadmill, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
And I usually do about that much, but I
Wow.
purposely stop it and don't keep track because I kind of don't want to know.
You don't want to know. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I understand that. One thing that you mentioned on here is that standing can cause vein issues, which is something that I have never thought about before.
Yes.
Can you describe what that is all about?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought this up because I actually want to mention, because this is another thing that people don't realize. And even until I started doing, a lot of research on this, I didn't realize. But the earliest example I could find was the 1700s. And at that time, there were already scientific works that had linked standing to certain types of health conditions, most notably varicose veins. And, edema, things related to circulation, circulatory problems. And today, that's still very much the case. And for standing specifically, there's no actual research on sitting disabilities is the thing, at least that I've been able to find.
Right.
There's one sociology paper, and that's the extent of it so far as I know.
Right.
But there has been quite a bit of research done on standing, because it is an occupational hazard for certain professions. So, for example, operating room nurses who have to basically stand still as long as the operation is going forward, certain types of factory workers, hairdressers. So there's been quite a bit of occupational research on the health problems of standing. And yeah, one big problem is circulatory problems, because you can condition your muscles. I have very strong leg muscles from standing and walking all the time, but you cannot condition your veins because eventually those valves that pump the blood back up to your heart, they're not going to be strong enough. And genetics plays a part, gender plays a part, posture definitely plays a part. So some people's veins will fail sooner than others. But at some point, if you're standing all the time, your veins will fail, and you cannot condition against that. So that is a major problem. Also, hip and knee issues are pretty serious side effects, because when you're standing, there's this synovial fluid that cushions your joints.
Right.
And as you're standing, it kind of pushes that fluid away. And now if you're off your feet every once in a while, you're sitting down or you're laying down, it allows, that fluid to come back in. But if you're on your feet constantly, it's much easier to wear away at those joints. So people tend to have a lot of knee and hip problems, a lot of foot problems, low back pain. A lot of times that causes sitting disabilities, but it can also be a consequence of standing all the time. And there's some questionable research on health effects of pregnancy where it seems to maybe be a thing, but obviously you can't do a lot of studies on pregnant women to see what hurts them. So that's possible. Yeah. So I didn't realize that there was actually some pretty good, solid research, from many different sources that have all come to pretty much the same conclusion, and that those health effects are real and are well studied.
Yeah.
And I read one study where, they actually quantified how much standing should you actually be doing in a day. And this was, for occupational, for if you're a nurse. And basically you should not, the cutoff, the scale didn't even go beyond this, was standing 4 hours a day.
Wow.
And including 1 hour at a time. And, I was thinking, I've been standing 20 hours a day. What is this nonsense?
Right.
But yeah, so it is actually, standing desks are great and helpful, but don't use them all the time.
Yeah, there's got to be some balance.
Right.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine. I'm a teacher, and when I'm not teaching virtually, I'm standing for my entire day, which is nothing compared to yours. But even that, I can feel it afterwards. I can feel it in my knees a little bit.
I'm sure,
I can feel the tiredness, the fatigue from having been standing all the time. So then it's like you do that, for 12 hours in a day.
Of course, yeah.
How is that going to affect you?
Right, yeah. You know how fun that is to stand all day.
When you say that veins will fail over time, that's a really scary thing to hear. What exactly fail is, and they will no longer properly pump blood back up to the heart?
Yeah. So basically what happens is, instead of, they basically can't keep pumping stuff up. And so you can have a couple of consequences, and I know because I've had them. You can get varicose veins, which is, you get those really puffy, angry looking, they look like a map of the Amazon kind of thing in your legs, because that's blood that's still stuck in those veins, and it causes them to distort and get bigger. You can also have something called edema, which is when your legs swell with fluid, which isn't necessarily, it's not blood. It's just fluid that leaks from the small capillaries. of your extremities. So I had that, there was a time I had to wear, I only had one pair of shoes that would fit, and I'd wear them to work. They were my mom's gardening shoes. But my feet were so swollen, I couldn't wear any socks, and I could only wear one pair of shoes. So, I mean, yeah, it does cause a lot of problems.
I've been there on that one before.
You have
and
also had so many fun health problems.
Well, mine are all connected with one thing that I did like a whole episode on the podcast about. But yes, I've had a fair share of crazy things, but I didn't have to stand the whole time.
Yeah. You just do that for your day job.
Yeah. So I'm fortunate in that regard. Because it doesn't sound like the most fun thing in the world. I think it's so interesting that one of the last points on the health problems that you mentioned is that standing all the time, people with sitting disabilities can develop neck and back problems. And it's like, well, a back problem is what puts you in this position in the first place.
Yeah,
It's almost a vicious cycle sort of thing in a way. I wonder if the symptoms and the cure of having to stand even makes that worse for some people.
Yeah, and a lot of times, so having to stand can cause back problems, and I don't know any research about this. I'm speculating, but especially for different occupations, if you're hunching forward or something, depending on what you're doing, that could very well lead to back problems. I know just among the group of people with sitting disabilities, they often run into those back and neck problems because, especially for those who can't stand, a lot of people have to lay down most of the time. Right. And then if you're trying to work on anything, you have to sort of contort into an awkward position to try to see the screen. So you end up with a lot of neck problems and arm pain and upper back issues and that sort of thing.
This is a strange question, but for a lot of people, when you go through something like this, you wind up with a lot of perspective change, I would say. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, I think they can be weirdly positive despite all the negativity. That's why it's kind of hard for me to word this, because I don't want to ask you what's good about having terrible sciatica.
What's the silver lining in this horrible thing?
Right, Is there a silver lining for you?
I would definitely say there has. Obviously, I don't want to minimize the challenges, and we've just spent almost an hour talking about that.
Right.
But I think this has led me to be so much more empathetic towards other people. Right. There's been, like, for example, one time we were planning this tea party just as a family thing. And so we had this selection of teas, and, I said, wait a minute, we need to have some herbal stuff because this one person is pregnant. She's not going to be able to drink caffeine. Or, when I visit elderly people, I'm much more aware of if they can't hear me, if they can't get up, if they're uncomfortable. So I think it's taught me to have a lot more empathy and to just be more attuned to the fact that so many people are trying to overcome some physical limitation, and they're doing the best that they can, and it's not easy. And also, just through, the sitting disability group and also talking to other people with sciatica. But I have met so many interesting and fun people. And, at first I was kind of like, do I want to identify as sitting disabilities? Because I don't think of myself as disabled. I don't want to be defined by my disability. I want to be known for the things that I can do. And I didn't, part of me, I'm embarrassed to admit now, but I did hold that idea of disabled people, like maybe sometimes they're lazy. Maybe sometimes, they could be doing more than they are. And now that I'm actually, I'm fine with calling myself, I have a sitting disability now. And I've met other people in the same boat, and these are not lazy people. These are not, less intelligent people. These are not less capable people. These are people who just have a problem with their body, who are perfectly able to contribute to the world and have a lot to offer. They just can't sit down. Yep. And so I've really valued a lot of those, relationships that I've cultured there. I've learned, I've met so many interesting people with interesting hobbies and perspectives from so many parts of the world. And I think that's really great. And that has sort of changed. Getting back to that, I think it's made me more empathetic towards people. Yeah. Mm-hmm, sure. It made me much more aware of what people have to offer. Yeah.
What they have, and also what they're going through. And
right.
You never know. You never know. for myself, the issues that I had caused me to gain a lot of weight. And it's like from that point forward, I find myself not really as judgmental as even if you're trying to be the best person. I think everyone has those sort of judgments where they think like,
and
oh
I
man,
heard
he
that
really
for
let
you,
himself
that was
go.
a corticosteroid Cushing
It
syndrome
was,
thing,
yeah,
right?
it was.
Yeah, that would be pretty tough because that's another thing where like everyone can see it.
Everyone can see
and they'll
it.
make judgments.
Yep. And I definitely felt that way, and I was like, oh wait, I can't really make these judgments about people anymore because
you don't know.
I know that I have no control over it. So who's to say what control other people have? And I mean, there's, if we're talking about health, there's some line, not to get off subject, but there's some line where it's like, yeah, you do need to take care of your body, and if therapy is what's involved to get to a place where you can take better care of your body, then definitely we need to seek that out. But it's just like, I don't want to make a snap judgment anymore because I've been there and done that. And I'm sure you kind of have that similar experience.
Right.
Like you're saying with that, like, oh, maybe disabled people are kind of, disabled. It's like, yeah, everyone has those judgments.
Yeah, it's like they're sad. But not necessarily.
Not necessarily. I think of when you said all that, I think of people that have like fibromyalgia because that's such a that's something where I think just in the past 10 years, the medicine has basically come to prove that it's real, and there were a lot of men and women in particular, I think are more susceptible to it, but that were saying for years that they had this tremendous pain, and even doctors were like, man, she's just kind of crazy.
Right. And I find, so I have sympathy on this level because, and I think this is fairly common for anyone with a chronic pain thing, but I've definitely been hit with the very nice, like, pain sensitization, like your brain has just reconfigured, which is the nice doctor way of saying it's all in your head. And at least for me, I can shoot back with, then how come it only affects one nerve?
Right.
And so I gotta pity anybody with those strange symptoms, fibromyalgia, certain kinds of autoimmune diseases, really so many conditions where somebody knows that they're in pain, but it's not like they've got a bullet wound that they can point to that's causing it. And because, you can't see the obvious reason, it's so easy for other people to minimize it or think, maybe it's psychological and it's not your fault, but maybe it's just how you're wired.
Right.
So well,
even from the doctor's perspective, they can't see, you can't really see nerves lighting up. We don't really have equipment sophisticated enough at this point to show that.
Right.
So it's just like,
so if the tests come back fine,
like you're fine. It's all in your head. Man.
It's so easy to reach for that. Sometimes with good intentions, sometimes not with good intentions.
No. Sometimes I think maybe a contributing factor is also, in some ways burnout. You're talking about people who see people with crazy symptoms all day, and the empathetic part, it's harder to keep that up when you're constantly seeing everyone's tragedy every single day.
Right. I'd go to neurologists and they were dealing with people, like MS patients or people who had clearly a fatal diagnosis.
Right.
So, my problem was fairly easy to like, you're walking, you're fine.
Right. My goodness. So you have a website called My Upright Life.
Yes, that's right.
Let's go into that a little bit because I want people to go visit it and find out more about.
Yeah, learn more about sitting disabilities.
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I cover, it's myuprightlife.com, and it's devoted to sitting disabilities and sciatica. So I have all sorts of stuff. Some of the studies that I've talked about today about the health effect of sitting disabilities, what I'm doing to treat my sciatica, links to some of the books that I've talked about, notes about the health problems that are associated with sitting disabilities, and links to the Facebook group where I found a lot of community. That's all there. If you are curious about learning more, absolutely check it out. Send me a message. My contact information is on there. I'm happy to get the word out.
Awesome. And what was the name of the Facebook group? If you don't mind sharing?
It's the Sitting Disabilities
Sitting
Facebook group.
Disabilities. Okay. Okay. One last question that I was going to ask earlier, and I forgot all about it. Slipped my mind. When we talk about sitting disabilities, in your case, you're coming from the perspective of sciatica. Are there other common ones that are lumped into the same thing that people maybe have not heard of? That come to your mind?
Yeah. So sitting disabilities is not a diagnosis of itself. It's anybody who has pain with sitting. So back problems are a fairly major part of that. But there are other conditions, pudental neuralgia, and I might actually be pronouncing that wrong. But basically, that's another nerve issue. It's a part of the nerve in the pelvis. That can be injured, some sort of pelvic floor disorders, which can be, nerves or muscles or due to various things. Tarlov cysts, which is, it's usually on a nerve root, a type of cyst which can cause pain. There seems to be some weird association with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which that's a connective tissue disorder. So there's a whole range of things that are associated with EDS. And they're predisposed to a lot of types of injuries. But there does seem to be a link with back problems and sitting disabilities. So it is a wider group. There's many different paths that lead you to having a sitting disability. I talk about sciatica and back problems because it's what I happen to have, but it's by no means the only condition.
The only thing, right. Okay. Thank you, Krista. That is, I think, pretty much wraps up our conversation. Everybody check out myuprightlife.com. Learn more about sitting disabilities because, wow, that is an amazing set of medical mystery that most of us are completely unaware of. And thank you so much, Krista, for coming on and helping us learn a little bit about it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Everybody check out ConverSapien next week. And I will see you guys next Monday.